Hello and welcome in today's exciting episode. I am going to make a few dresses with the keyhole bit at the neckline from pattern Simplicity S9469. Perfect jacket. So this Simplicity pattern S9469 is actually for a top, but when you make it as a top, you have to use like facing on the inside, and I don't like that sort of flapping around. So I'm going to make it the bodice for a dress. That way I can do it fully lined. So this is the first one I made, and I feel like the keyhole bit was a little bit too big. On the picture on the pattern, it's perfectly fine on her. I think just because I have a smaller torso, I just felt like it was a little too revealing, just a tiniest amount. So I cut out another one. I mean, it's okay for one, but I'm not going to make more than one at that. So I cut out a second one. I had 2 yards of this fabric here, and it's fashion width, so it's quite wide as well. I used about half a yard on the bodice and then the rest in the skirt. And so I cut it out the same, but when I was sewing just the keyhole bit, I halved the seam allowance, so it's more bodice and less gap, if you get what I mean. So it's the same pattern. I didn't have to alter the pattern. I didn't think I would, but it's just the tiniest amount, and I just feel so much better wearing that dress rather than the bodice that I made first. It's just a tiny amount, but yeah, it matters to me. So this is it from the front and the side, and I think it looks absolutely adorable with the sash tied around the waist. It's so cute. And yeah, it's just a pullover dress. I love pullover dresses, and it's a little crooked on the mannequin here, so I straighten it up so that the keyhole thing is centered. It looks really vintage. I love it. So I'm going to make a layer cake skirt for this dress. So I will finish this dress, and I think as long as it's got a really long maxi skirt, I'll be able to wear that. But I will also, and obviously I made those two off camera because I was just sort of working out what would work. So now I'm going to make this one on camera step by step to just show you the process. And yeah, so I've got 2 yards of this fabric, which isn't enough to do those big puffy sleeves. So I'm going to use 2 yards of the plain blue with the machine embroidered lace on it, detail on it as well. So I'll start by cutting out the bodice and the first tier of the skirt out of this one here. When you cut out the front of the bodice, you cut it on the fold, and part of it is, see, the keyhole is, and it might be confusing as to whether you cut out the top bit. You don't have to. Yeah, there's actually a cut in between the keyhole and the top 2 bits. You need that cut to be there. They have to cut into 2 bits, otherwise you won't be able to sew it properly. So yes, you do cut it. So I've cut the front, the back. These 2 small bits at the bottom right corner here are cuffs for the sleeves because I don't want to put elastic on them. And I've also cut out the 2 ties where you tie the keyhole bit. They're under the sleeve pattern. So now I'm just going to cut the sleeves out of the embroidery on glaze plain blue fabric. And here we go. There are the sleeves. They're beautiful. So they're cut and they've got their notches in them. I'm not going to cut the second tier of the skirt just yet because I'm not sure whether I want a short ruffle or a full-length second tier for a dress. So I'll make up the dress with these sleeves at the bodice and the first tier, and then I'll decide whether I want a full second tier on that skirt. And with the original prototype here, I still have to make the layer cake skirt for this dress. So I've got a bunch of different scraps, leftover scraps. Some of them I think are a little bit too colourful. This one on the right here is the rest of the 2 yards of this Liberty of London fabric. And then I've got this other one with the historic print, and I've got this one here with a vintage print. I think as long as I put the dark one in between the 2 lighter ones, they will mesh well. And they're all later on this month, you'll see my other layer cake dresses that I finished, the blue ones. And these are just the tiny scraps left over from each of those. So there's like, you know, a quarter of a yard, half a yard of them. So I think the ones on the left are too bright, those two. But the olive one, the vintage one with the little flowers, and the historic print, I think these ones all mesh really well. So I'll use them, and maybe that black one on the end. So I'll use them to make the skirt for that. But first, we will crack on with this one here. Normally, when you start a simple dress, the first thing you do is pin the front and the back of the bodice together and the front and back of the lining together. But this one has ties, and the ties have to be sewn to the bodice before you can finish the bodice. So we'll start with the ties and the sleeves. Well, I filmed that section of the video an absolute age ago, but then I had to do the jacket. Actually, you saw a fabric haul and then the blue dresses that I made from the fabric haul. Then I made the jacket. And now it is time to come back to the keyhole dress. Sometimes I work a few videos in advance and I'm quite successful, but then I have works, like real life work stuff to do, and I just get behind again. So yes, here we are, last minute. I actually ran out of the black cotton that I use for the lining too. So that literally just arrived today. So I've cut out my lining, and I did do my ties, but I forget where I put them. I put them somewhere safe, so I can't find them. So I've had to cut out new ties. So there's no longer going to be floral bits at the bottom of the sleeves. So I had to use that. So what you do with the ties is you fold them in half, then half again. And I've just got them pinned here just so you can see what I mean. So you find the center, then fold the raw edges into the center, then you press it together. So all the raw edges are in the very center, and you've got, so it's just the fabric, and you've enclosed all the raw edges. So then you do that, and you go along and you pin the whole thing, and you do both of them. One end, you have to also tuck in the end and do that sort of square corner thing, and then you have to hand stitch them. On these two, I just machine sewed the right along. I can't get the camera to focus. I tried a couple of times, and seriously, this is the best one, and it's super out of focus. So yeah, but I feel like you can tell how hard the seam is, because when you sew something with a sewing machine, you get a hard seam, which is good. I mean, it can give you extra support, but on occasions like this, when you want the you don't want them to sort of kink, you want them to sit properly, then it is worth the effort of just hand stitching them. So I hand stitch them, taking it one pin out as I go. The next thing to do is the sleeves. So you just fold them in half and sew along the underarm seam. Well, I've used dark thread on dark blue fabric, so you can't really see, but I've machine sewn the seam. So the next step is to do the pleats at the bottom. You can either just sew elastic on, or you can put 3 pleats. So I do 1 center pleat, so the exact opposite place to the underarm seam. And then I do 2 on either side. So at each quarter, you've either got a seam or a pleat. And then once you sew those 3 pleats in, then you just turn it up, go around and turn it all up by 1 inch, and then hand stitch that down. So I've got pins where I'm about to hand stitch. So that's both of them done, and we've got both ties done. So now we are ready to start the bodice. So we are going to need all 4 pieces, 2 lining, 2 outer bodice, front and a back, and pin them together at the shoulders, just at the shoulders for now. So I've machine sewn them. That's the lining one, and this is the outer bodice. So they're done. So the next step is to lay the lining out with the seams down. So the right side of the lining upwards, and then the right side of the outer bodice down. So the 2 right sides are together, and we've got the seams on the outside, and just pin the necklines together. Just go around and make sure the seams are sitting the correct way. Don't bother with the keyhole bit at the moment. We're just doing the neckline proper. So we will put the ties in a moment, but first you just do the neckline and don't worry about anything else. So once it's pinned, take it over to the sewing machine, carefully sew around that. And once you've machine sewed, then you clip the curves, and you can sort of see, yeah, you can see, I've clipped the curves. So now the next step is that we have to attach our ties. So you flip the outer bodice up so you can see that neckline, and then you carefully place your ties in there with the raw edge at the edge of the keyhole there, and then you pin it into place with all the layers, and just use your fingers to see that it's actually right up next to the neckline, and then carefully sew them into place. I sew it 3 times. I mean, I'm never going to pull it really hard to tie the knot, but you never know if you like holding a kid and they just yank on it really hard or something. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Then make sure your ties, sort of pull them out and make sure they're well clear of the keyhole, and you just pin those layers of the lining and the outer bodice together around the circle of the keyhole, and then it is time to machine sew. I still feel like the keyholes on the other 2 dresses are a little bit too big, so I'm going to go even less seam allowance on this one here. It's just a tiny amount, but I just want to do it to see what it turns out like. So that's what I did, and it is quite close to the edge, but I still sort of clip the curves to make sure it sits properly. And I also clipped those corners at the top just so that when you pull out the ties, it will all sit nicely. And here we go. This is actually really cute. I like this fabric now. Because I've been working on it so long and it hasn't gone anywhere, it's been really frustrating. But anyway, if you want to do a sleeveless version, I'm doing sleeves, but if you want to do a sleeveless version, now is where you do the burrito method to do those armhole sleeves. But as I said, I've got sleeves. So the next step is to do the side seams. So you just sort of have to turn it back inside out and do the lining seams, so the left and the right side of the lining together, left and right side of the, yeah. So you just do those seams on the machine, then turn it back in the correct way. Now it is time to attach the sleeve to the armhole. Before I do this, I prepare the bodice by just pinning the 2 layers together because you're going to work with them as one layer. And I also put a pin on the back of the sleeve so I can tell. It's really hard to tell the front of the sleeve from the back of the sleeve, but they are slightly different, so it does matter. It'll feel awkward if you sew it on the wrong side. So you can see I've got the pin clearly is at the back and it's on the back. So yeah. Once you've worked out which side is which, then you just do pin one sleeve in, then the other sleeve in. I pin the top center pin, the bottom center pin, then the bottom half, and then the top half, because it's the top third that you have to ease in or pleat. So yeah, I do all the rest first, then do the difficult bit. So now that it's all pinned, it is time to take it over to the machine and carefully sew it. If you find it really hard to set sleeves or sew them in, just hand stitch everything into place and then machine sew. And then if you can see your hand stitch seams, you can always pull them out or you can just leave them in. Okay, our bell-shaped sleeves are now sewn in, and I will set the bodice aside, and it is time to work on the skirt. This is actually really simple. It's just 2 bits of fabric, but if you do want pockets, this pattern is obviously just a top, and I'm just adding some random skirt to make it into a dress. But yeah, if you do want to add pockets, then it's really easy because it's a 2-piece skirt for this dress. So you just pin them into the side and then, yeah, stitch it all as one whole thing with the pockets there. But I don't particularly like pockets. Feel like I need pockets in every dress I make. So I'm just going to stitch them together, and because it's salvage to salvage, there's no raw edges, so I can just stitch the 2 bits together. So here we go. I've sewn them together and just folded them. So this is what it looks like in a quarter. So it's actually a pretty decent skirt. It's going to look so vintage once it's done. So then I just found put 4 pins in the bodice and 4 pins in the skirt so that I could match them up. And then I found 8 points, then 16, and then I just pleated everything down once it was all, divided. I pleated it all down. It's just knife pleats all facing the same way. You can do box pleats, or you can do a combination of box pleats and knife pleats, whatever takes your fancy. I tend to sort of alternate between all of them because I like anything vintage. So yeah, this one's just knife pleats all going the same way. So once you machine sew that, check it, then machine sew it again to reinforce it, and then you turn the whole thing properly inside out and you pull down the lining, and all the raw seams are inside up in the bodice. And you also fold up the raw seam of the lining, and then you pin it into place, and then you just go around and you hand sew the lining down, and all the raw seams are covered, and it's absolutely adorable. So here we go. Sorry about the lighting again. This is last minute. I'm doing this at night, and then, yeah, I had to edit and do the voice narration now so that I could get it ready to upload. So sorry about this. I do have time before my next video, the next jacket I'm making, and I will make sure that the reveal shots are done during daylight because I do love that lighting of natural light much more. But here we go. These are and I didn't have time to do my layer cake skirt for that one that's currently a top on the right in this picture. I was going to, it's the Liberty of London one, and I do have all the fabrics and I've sorted them into order, and I was going to try and madly rush and get it done, but I've actually had quite a few requests to have a video just on layer cake dresses, so to show lots of different layer cake dresses and then explain in detail how to make a layer cake dress, so people can go to the store with like a list of, you need 10 fabrics, you need this much of this one, this much of this one. So I'm going to do that as a separate video right at the start of next month, I think, because I think these fabrics look gorgeous together, but unfortunately I just didn't have time. So it's just paired with one of my 3 tiered skirts, summer skirts made out of cotton lawns at the moment. But anyway, so yeah, here are the dresses. I think with the dress that I just made, I might go back and sew the seams of the sleeves a little bit, so the seams are a little bit wider so that it sits further in on the shoulder, because I have really small shoulders and I hate wearing clothes that sort of sit off my shoulder. It makes me feel like a child wearing adult's clothes. So I think I'll do that. If it was like for a person with average sized shoulders or larger shoulders, then it would be gorgeous, but it's just a little too big for me. So I think I'll go back in and make that change. But everything else about it, I absolutely love. I did try it with the vintage skirt underneath, vintage petticoat underneath it, but I prefer it without. I don't think I'll add another layer tier to the dress either. I don't know. I think I'll wear it a few times like this after I've gone in and altered the shoulders of the sleeves just a tinsy bit. But I like it this length. I just think they look absolutely adorable. And I think a full pleated skirt actually looks good when it hits just below the knee. So yeah, as I said, it's such a shame I didn't have time to do the skirt for that layer cake dress. But, there's only 24 hours in a day, so I will do it. I just think these fabrics, when I first put them together, I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But the more I look at this, I've had them as a stack on my side table. And the more I look at it, the more I love it. So I'm really looking forward to making that one. But yeah, it will have to wait a week or so until I finish the jackets that I have to finish this month. But yeah, so there we go. Keyhole top. I didn't try it as a blouse because I knew I just would not wear it if it had facing. I hate things flapping around. So yeah, I much prefer a fully lined bodice. And yeah, to make it up as a bodice, that with just by adding a simple skirt was just so, it's something that I will absolutely wear, whereas a blouse I probably wouldn't have. So yeah, I do think this one here is my favourite so far, but once I turn that other top into a layer cake dress, I suspect that will become my favourite of these three. I think I will do this pattern again because it's a lovely pattern, but I think I'll do like more of a long teardrop rather than a round teardrop. So yeah, but it's a really good pattern, quite easy to follow and very pretty outcome. So highly recommend. And that is it for this video. If you're watching this in the future, then I'll put a link at the end, and I'll link it to all my July makes, and you'll be able to see it in the daylight hours with natural light. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I do totally recommend this pattern. I think I'll see how this layer cake version goes, but I think, yeah, I'll probably make a few other layer cake versions of it too. It's such an adorable bodice/blouse.